So welcome to concurrent session C6, Provincial HSJCC Anti-Racism Framework. My name is Sophie and I'm joined by my colleague Mike, and we will be your facilitators here today. Before we get started, I'll review some quick housekeeping notes and then we can introduce our speakers for the session. I would like to draw your attention to the bottom of your screen where you'll find the Zoom toolbar. You can use the Q&A feature to submit your questions throughout the presentation. We will review these questions at the end of the session and do our best to answer all the questions. Please ensure that you have your microphone turned off until the Q&A portion of the session. Please note that we will be recording this session to upload for the conference website for future viewing by those who have registered for the conference, and you'll be able to access this for 90 days following the conference. I would like to remind everyone that we have a closed captioning for all the sessions, and you can click on the CC icon below the video window to access this feature. We kindly ask that you complete the evaluation for this session by clicking the session in the agenda on the virtual platform. There will be a survey button at the bottom of the session next to the join button. Your feedback is appreciated and will be used to inform future events such as this conference. We would like to respectfully ask all of those attending today's session to engage with each other thoughtfully and always consider the impacts of your words and interactions as others. As facilitators, we will not tolerate any abusive or inappropriate behavior or hate speech, and will ensure that anyone who engages in such behavior is removed from the session. If you have been disturbed or affected by such an event, please do what is needed for you. Take a break, step outside, practice deep breathing, or reach out to someone you trust. If you are in crisis and require immediate support, please click on the FAQ icon on the conference homepage to access contact information for Connects Ontario. If you'd like to report an incident, contact the event manager by clicking on the Assist button at the top right menu bar on your screen. So now that we've done a bit of the housekeeping there, I would like to now introduce you to our presenters for this session. Today we have Shereen Rampersad, Valeria Daniele, and Dwayne Lee. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sorry about that. I just needed to get our slides up. Hopefully, we can all see the slide deck. So thank you for joining us today for our session, Equity in Action, a Framework for Addressing Anti-Racism in Human Services and Justice Sectors. I'll start by introducing myself, and then I will pass it on to Dwayne and Valerie to introduce themselves as well. My name is, Sophie mentioned, is Shereen Rampersad. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Manager at Services and Housing in the province, also known, probably better known as SHIP. I have been with the organization that I work for almost 19 years and have found my experiences to be very valuable. I'm a social worker, but more importantly, I am a mixed race immigrant settler to this country who has valued my experiences and have used my experiences to practice and to become more anti-racist, more anti-oppressive, and moved from being an advocate and an ally towards being an accomplice. I have found my experience with the HSJCC to be so valuable, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have participated in this work that we're going to be talking about today. So I will pass it on now to Dwayne.
Thank you, Shereen. My name is Dwayne Lee. A little bit about myself would be this work and starting with it as a community connector. I'm a person with lived experience coming from both the work as an individual has the I always say it's part of me, but doesn't define me. I am an amputee, I like amputees. So a lot of the work does range from not only anti-racism work going across healthcare, human services, and justice, but also looking at the lives and the mental health of both able-bodied and uh, differently able-bodied individuals as well. So a very important part of my work is engaging with individuals at whatever leadership to front lines or right in the community that allows for that exchange, that key exchange to begin to happen. As I have been on this, the committee that started with just working on how to begin this framework to here we are today and what we'll be presenting to you. So with that, I will pass it over to Valeria.
Thanks, Dwayne. As Dwayne said, my name is Valeria Daniele. I'm a person with lived and living experience with the human services sector. I serve as co-chair for the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. I'm also a research associate with the Tracking Injustice Project with the Institute of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Carleton University. It's a transparency project that tracks deaths in custody and police-involved deaths in Canada since the year 2000. I am also pursuing my JD at Osgoode Hall Law School, and I hope to use my law degree to further human rights for people with complex needs. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll get into a little bit about the framework and the background and how it came to be. So members of the HSJCC network identified a need for enhanced guidance and coordinated support to strengthen anti-racism policies and strategies across the network. In response, a dedicated working group was established in January 2023. This group led scoping, evaluation, and knowledge exchange activities. Through years of deliberation, discussion, and joint decision making, this group has led to the advancement and development of the anti-racism framework. This framework aims to promote equity, accountability, and meaningful systemic change in service delivery and governance. We used focus groups and an environmental scan to inform the outline and contents of the framework. A full draft of the framework was completed in January of 2025, and the review process is now underway. Over the past several months, we have received valuable feedback from across the HSJCC network. We are especially grateful to the Black-led and Indigenous-led organizations that have generously contributed their time, expertise, and lived experience to help strengthen this work. Their input has been instrumental as we move toward finalizing the document in the very near future.
Thank you, Val. So now you know why we started this work to begin with, and we all can attest to the idea that this work is very important. But we wanted to share with you why we think this work is also required. The Human Services and Justice Coordinating Committees are driven by members who are all deeply committed to advancing human rights in both the justice system and the human services systems. That has been the impetus for why we think this work is required from all of us, and why we brought together this working group that is representative of all the different types of tables that we have within the HSJCCs. By equipping our members with anti-racism tools and perspectives, we're able to create and enhance their efforts to create a more inclusive, equitable, and responsive system. Our intention with this work and with this framework is to really empower regional and local co-chairs to lead the changes that we want to be able to do as an HSJCC network. We want to be able to build community resiliency that further strengthens our efforts towards this endeavor to advance human rights and advocate for necessary reforms to all levels of the system. And furthermore to that, we believe this work is required because reconciliation requires action. This framework serves as a starting point for reconciliation, hopefully. And hopefully you'll be able to see that when we're able to launch the framework in the near future. The only way towards reconciliation is for us to seek justice by decolonizing our systems. And our hope with our framework is that you'll be able to see how we have engaged with community, with those most impacted by racism, to be able to learn from them how to seek justice and what that looks like, and how decolonization can really help us to move towards the work that I'm hopeful we're all doing in working towards the 94 calls to action. Although the framework can be a starting point for organizations, for HSJCC members and co-chairs, the important part of this is that personal reflection that we hope our framework inspires you to is crucial in seeing what this work can really do for you and what you can bring towards this work.
Thank you, Shereen. Looking through the process, the work that we underwent to ensure that we were looking not only at the challenges, but looking at the solutions. And that gave us, we had a very robust way of looking at things, but also allowed us to see where the challenges, even if we went back, what we would do better. And I like to look at the challenges from that perspective, the improved upon states, the missing voices and representation. We know that with more storytelling, the more engagement with community members, that you get a much deeper understanding of things that may academically be understood from a social determinants of health perspective, or other ways of doing the job that you do every day. But in terms of making sure that those voices feel that they're not only invited to co-create, to have a seat at the table, so to speak, was where we wanted to have those diverse voices, but also understood that given more time with balancing both the depth and readability of the document, we also realized that the wording of information is almost as important as the gathering of the information itself to convey it best for the use, as Sheree saying, it's a starting point for people. With the solution side, it was strengthening those opportunities to build relationships, looking at associations of different cultures in the community, understand there's a whole mixed race, biracial, and multiracial aspect to a lot of individuals as we live in this time of 2025. So it was really looking at how we could embrace the shared learning, have that equity of all the voices at the table. We have titles, we are all here and working on one goal, and that is moving from looking at things in one point of view and getting to a more anti-racist, less colonialized point of view. And of course, make those changes successful, not only in the physical realm, but also on the virtual realm. So many things that we have started to adjust to in working with virtual doctors and working with other virtual ways that service is provided. So we definitely want to make sure that we included those as solutions. And I'll pass it over to Val.
Thank you, Dwayne. So I just want to give a high-level overview of the framework, of its contents, what's included. It's comprised of 8 sections. Among them are, why this work is required, which I think Shereen gave a great summary of. We also have a comprehensive anti-racism glossary of terms. Other sections are based on specific anti-racism tools, although I have to preface that by saying the framework is not meant to be prescriptive. These things are meant to be adapted and applied to specific contexts that people are working within. So diverse, meaningful engagement emphasizes the importance of building authentic relationships with Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities through inclusive and ongoing collaboration. It outlines approaches for committees to ensure that community voices are meaningfully integrated into planning, decision-making, and evaluation processes. Guidance is provided on equitable engagement practices, compensation for lived experience, and creating inclusive spaces for meaningful participation. Messaging advocacy focuses on developing consistent anti-racist communication and advocacy strategies. It highlights how language, storytelling, and public messaging can reinforce or challenge systemic inequities, amplify marginalized voices, and influence change. And lastly, I'll touch on the race-based data collection section, which provides guidance on ethically collecting, analyzing, and using race-based data to identify and address inequities within the justice and human services sectors. It discusses best practices for data governance, community consent, transparency, ensuring that data collection supports accountability and drives measurable progress toward racial equity. Each section provides an overview, best practices, implementation strategies, and a co-chair corner, which offers potential practical applications that are tailored for committees. Thank you.
So thank you, Val, for that. So as you can see, the framework is fairly complex, but we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. The usability of this framework is what has been of utmost importance to us. So how can you use this framework with your committee and with your organizations? As you'll see from here, what we've done is we've outlined a circle because there are many ways in which you can use this framework. We're just giving you a few of the ways in which we intended for people to be able to use the framework. The first one is guide and share. It provides a good shared foundation to guide the anti-racism work that you may be doing within your own HSJCC committee. But across the network, we are all collaboratively working on anti-racism practices within our organizations and within the network itself. It uses the suggested actions as a practical starting point to move the work forward together. So like I said before, reconciliation is one of the ways in which we can use this framework to work towards reconciliation, but as a starting point. So we have no intention of saying that the framework is, prescriptive, like Valerie said. It really is about being a guidance document and guidance that's based in the voices of those most impacted. The framework was a collaborative process. We really did spend quite a bit of time working with community connectors, people from the community who volunteered and gave and shared with us their time and their stories to really inform the framework. So when you're using this document, it really is for you to be able to use it to reflect and discuss as well. Our hope is that HSJCC co-chairs will see the document as a way to engage their membership in continued reflection, and then for members to be able to engage communities in creating spaces and safe spaces for dialogue about what's working within those communities and what needs to be able to shift, and how we as HSJCC members and organization members can really help with those shifts, how our actions can support reconciliation and continue to advance equity across all of the systems in which we are all a part of. And then further to that, we want to be able to use the framework to evaluate and assess. Hopefully, the framework will inspire you and your members at your HSJCC tables and within your organizations to ask critical questions. As you're going about embarking on this work, what are we truly looking at? What are we truly assessing? Have we been inclusive? Are the people most impacted part of the decision-making processes? Have they informed what we're doing? Have they informed the processes that we are going about doing within our organizations? Are we building equity and advancing reconciliation in meaningful ways? And so often so often we get stuck in this idea that we are within our organizations, we are doing this work and we are so committed to this work that we get stuck thinking that this work is solitary, that we're doing it together with ourselves and organization. Um, Most often, this work is most valuable when we include community, when we go out and seek the information from community, but also when we seek guidance from community, which we did with this framework. We were guided through our process by community members who told us what we needed to do, who shared with us their experiences of our systems that we have created that in and of themselves are oppressive. So we really used the impact stories from community members to guide us in our work in this framework, and we hope that it does the same for you. And then finally, the framework can be used to adapt and act. This is the most important part. It is a framework, so it's, like I said, it's not prescriptive, but it does provide some interactions that you can have, some ways in which you can engage community, some suggestions for ways which you can apply what the framework may be suggesting for you. We want you to be able to apply your insights from the reflections that you have when you go through the framework to strengthen the capacity and integrate any new learnings you may have into your policies, programs, and partnerships. We want to ensure that implementation of the framework aligns with the broader goals of reconciliation. So like we said, this is not everything that you can do. It's not comprehensive, but these are just some suggestions that we have found and that we try to build into the framework as we were co-creating it. So now there's some lessons learned, and we can all take a few minutes to go through some of the lessons that we each learned from this process. And it was a very long process. We started this working group, like Val mentioned, in January 2023, and we are now in 2025. So one of the things that I learned is that we do need to engage earlier in the process. We created a working group that started building out what our intentions were, what we wanted to do, how we wanted to go about it. But we didn't engage community until further along in the process. So if I could go back, and I think potentially some of our members of the working group think the same way, if we could go back, we would have engaged community at the beginning when we were making those decisions about the direction we wanted to take with the framework, the direction that we needed to go and building out the framework, even in the process of holding focus groups with community. We could have engaged community earlier in the process so that they could have helped us build those processes together. So that's one of the lessons that I took from this process.
I can echo that, Shereen, as well. And I think particularly with the focus groups, um, I would, next time definitely have a call out for people with lived and living experience to participate in those focus groups earlier. I think we could have benefited from perhaps a larger group of people that are part of the discussion. Also, leveraging appreciative inquiry. So the process that we took was to ask very pointed questions that related to each section of the framework, and that seemed at the time like the most logical approach. But in that approach, we did lose a lot of the storytelling and the discussion and the ability for folks to just express freely without too much constraint. And I think we could have benefited from more of that open discussion and storytelling and sharing. So next time around, I think we would do that call out earlier. Maybe do both, have part of the focus group that asks very specific questions, but then have another portion of it where we just have open discussion and sharing, so we could learn about our blind spots because, our compartmentalized sections in our framework, you know, are limited to our imaginations and what we think should be in there. But there's so much more beyond those sections that we could have gotten insights towards. So I would definitely echo that as well. I'll pass it on to Dwayne.
Thank you. And really, I think what you actually, I think we're all conveying here is that the level of appreciation for that, well, appreciative inquiry, well named, would be to actually see how, in the way in the previous slide that we're talking about, the way to adapt and act. We're looking back with that 2020 vision, and this guide to how we have gone through the process, I think also brings out where the missing voices could have made the level of storytelling not only more compelling, but it just like having a section where co-chairs corner, it would be almost like a section where you'd have ideally looking back to be able to create something that has a lot of storytelling attached to very specific parts of the experiences shared. So storytelling being key with those consider different areas that only lived experience can bring, only community members or other I would say we are PhDs of ourselves in a lot of ways. And having individuals speak to that was a process that made finding a unified voice, but also a way to give a way to look at this framework in a way that will allow you to have the adaptability to act in the way that you see fit. And of course, where you see the missing voices or other areas that might be necessary with engaging with different members, engagement in co-design will, we hope, will allow you to refer to, even utilize some of those best practices, because that was exactly the process that we use and we hope can be built upon at this. So thank you.
I'll just finish this part off maybe by saying that some of these things that we have up here as lessons learned were really throughout the process. We learned as we went along. We made mistakes, and we learned from those mistakes. Not really mistakes, but we had some roadblocks. And so one of the areas that you have here is focus on the difficult areas. Anti-racism and anti-oppressive work is difficult by its nature. Otherwise, we would have already, eradicated racism. We would have found reconciliation. We would have been able to reconcile the challenges that we face as a country and as organizations. But some of the things that we were able to lean into was this idea that from the beginning, we fit people into boxes and we fit people into labels. And certainly we had to focus our intentions. And so we did create categories for folks to join focus groups based on how they identified. But one of the issues that arose with that, the challenges that we needed to speak to was when the intersections of people doesn't necessarily fit into the categories that we created. So I think our initial categories or our initial ways of holding focus groups were for Black, Indigenous, and racialized people. And we realized that there was also a missing voice in that, and that people pointed out to us when it comes to folks that are mixed race, when it comes to folks that, are from the white community, but also have a very meaningful conversation to have around anti-racism. So if I look back at those difficult conversations that we needed to have in engagement sessions, those also strengthened our resolve and they moved us forward in looking to try to find a unified voice and recognizing that sometimes that's just not possible. In this work, people come with their stories and people have had different experiences when you say anti-racism. And we need to be able to recognize and honor people's personal experiences. But also, in order to build a framework, we need to be able to focus intentionally. And so, if we could go back, I wouldn't give up those difficult conversations that we had and those challenges that we found when we tried to put people into boxes, recognizing that we had to. We had to focus in some strategic way. And we wanted to ensure that the voices of those most impacted, the voices of those that are usually not invited to the table were predominant, that they were priority. So, we did things with intention, but in that intention, what we found was that we also had an impact in how people saw their opportunity to express themselves, and whether or not that expression and identity that we placed on people was really impactful for them. So I hope that we have also built that sort of reflection into our framework as well, with the understanding that sometimes the things that we learn from going through these processes are so much more valuable than what we thought we were going to learn. And I echo what Val and Dwayne have said about the importance of stories. Stories are that place of learning. And I think that we started to create enough safety and trust in those focus groups for people to want to tell their stories. But then we kind of didn't provide enough of an avenue for those stories to really meaningfully become the central part of this framework. So for me, that's a lesson learned in moving forward. And I think we have tried to kind of backtrack a little bit in this stage of where we are now with the framework, in getting feedback and reflection from communities and from organizations who serve those communities. The feedback that we're receiving, I think, is meaningful because it does help us to centralize those stories and see what we have missed and see maybe potentially some of the ways in which we can ensure by offering suggestions and recommendations within the framework in the co-chair's corner, of ways in which you might not have to make the mistakes or the ways in which we did things that we could do differently moving forward. So our suggestions for you in using the framework have come from a place of learning where we have learned what we could do differently and how we can move forward differently. So hopefully that's helpful with your use of the framework moving forward, because I think our learning in creating the framework really does come across when you read the document. And it is really challenging to put into a document, especially one that is this important and necessary. It's really challenging to capture everything that we learned ourselves in one document. But I think one of the things that we've agreed as a working group is that this is a living, breathing entity. It's a framework. So the intention is for it to manifest itself in the work that you are going to be able to do with it. And hopefully we will be able to continue to adapt the framework as things change. And hopefully as we see system changes, we'll be able to adapt and continue to create and co-create together the next renditions and the future renditions of this framework moving forward. Okay. Anything to add, Val and Dwayne, before I move on?
No, you covered it. Thank you, Shereen.
Thank you.
would have one little piece before we
Go ahead.
jump into would be the part of, we really did have an opportunity with the working as a reflection piece, working with the various individuals. Gave a little bit of homework at the beginning. And what we also learned from that is not only have time to digest, but time to discuss in a greater fashion, I think would build out not only the way that hopefully utilizing this and adapting it to what you need or whether it's initiative programs, even on a situation of decision making, that sometimes the lived experience individual just needs a little bit more information, a little more time to, I know there's timelines and deadlines involved. It's just really taking that into consideration that we saw that, again, if we could go back, it would absolutely having a, not necessarily hand holding, but checking in to ensure that the information was concise and clear to promote our future conversations. Whether we go back to them, looping back and keeping them in the process all the way through, or if it is, again, a time constraint scenario where we just have to build out that within the time that is allotted. So just want to add that piece, since working with lived experience individuals is a multi, is a diverse effort of diverse minds giving diverse stories, which requires diverse thinking and engagement. Thank you.
So it's you again, Dwayne.
All right. So we have the next steps and our future directions. This is where we are essentially looking to get those final edits to, when we look at those perspectives I was speaking about, the intersectionality makes it, and this echoes to what was discussed in today's keynote, the idea of having the love, having the care, that once you've created that safe space, to really have the perspectives of those partnerships, of that co-design, and that's what we're planning to do with this final edit. Really engage with the perspectives and have a way to move forward to what we have next to where we're sharing and disseminating that. Allowing that the framework to be this robust strategy for communication, for interactions, for how to build relationships, to retain not only the individuals that have started, but to know that they have that seat at the table, to know that they have the their information has been taken and applied in a manner that we know we can disseminate and share with them as well, to say this is the product of the work that we've been reaching out and working with you all the way through to, and of course to disseminate to the HSJCC members. So I'll be in developing tools, training, and online resources. So it's not something that sits in your email box, not a PDF that sits off of somewhere, but actually to be able to refer back to it. We hope to have where Co-Chairs Corner will allow some of those tools and those trainings to allow the co-chairs to have specific things that they could bring to those discussions in the different shapes and forms that they will be created in the future. As well, of course, the types of training that we know are being discussed in both days of this conference. And we also know that it's day-to-day life applications that we want to be able to ensure that whether it's online or tools that you're developing for your own, adapting for your own needs, that this framework will help with the local, regional committees to, well, as it has there, adopt a framework, but adopt a mindset, harking back to what Shereen was mentioning, an ability to know that whether it's an individual that is the first time on the committee or someone that is a familiar face and really is more engaged in the work. There was a speaker yesterday, and I believe it was the lived experience. Yeah, it was one of the lived experience sessions where they actually made a point of saying that sometimes speaking in academic and with that academic sound book smarts. That was triggering for some individuals. So now after that, it really made me think of how we create spaces that could be safe space, brave space. But maybe there's more nuances to how those spaces are created from the way that even the words that we utilize, not in any other way than to say that we're all trying to meet here for one goal, and that is to move together with that love, with that connection, with that equality that we are flesh and bone, and really and truly, at the end of the day, the community holds information that allows us all to work better together. And that, I think, is the best way to share the next steps and directions for this framework.
Thank you, Dwayne. I agree. So now it's your turn, everyone. I don't know if everybody has used Mentimeter before, but we have a couple of questions that we would like to use Mentimeter to go through with you. If you haven't used it before, there are two ways in which you can join. If you have your phone, you can join with the QR code. Just scan the QR code and it should bring you to the Mentimeter page. If you have a laptop, you can join there as well by going to www.menti.com and then entering the code up here. And I'll just say the code is 45369869 if you're joining that way. I know it's cut off a little bit here and I'm not sure how that happened, but so those are the two ways in which you can join Mentimeter. If somebody could put the code in the chat, that would be fantastic as well for those that want to join on their laptop. So like I said, we have a couple of questions. Now that you have a little bit of information about the framework itself, and our hope is to have the framework out for you in the very near future. Hopefully by 2026 is our year. 2026 is our year. And so one of the things I wanted to say too is that this has taken us a really long time. And so, you know, part of that time has been to be able to have the space as a working group, to be able to have the dialogue and the discourse that we needed in order to be able to create the framework the way that it was intended to be. As a resource for people, as a guidance for people, as a way of opening up conversation and opening up sometimes challenging conversations. Like I said, anti-racism work is not easy. It's not meant to be easy. And so I don't know why we thought going through and building a framework was going to be easy either, but here we are almost 3 years later. But we're very proud of what we have been able to collectively create for this community. So let's go to the first question. So we are interested in knowing how you see yourself using this type of framework moving forward, how you see yourself if you are as a member of the HSJCC committee that you're on, or in your organization, or even yourself personally, how you see the potential of using such a framework to improve the lives of the people in your communities. So we're really interested to see, and hopefully it'll come up. If people, you can just, it's open text, so you can just write in whatever ways in which you see yourself being able to use the framework in your own work. Oh, here we go. And Val and Dwayne, jump in anytime, okay? So I'll start reading things out. Going through section by section at each meeting, that's a great use of it as well. It is a pretty extensive and comprehensive document. So fair warning before we, release this on the world. It is, and it's meant to be. But like we said, we've tried to make it as accessible as possible and as user-friendly as possible. And it's not meant to be read cover to cover. That's not the kind of document or framework that it is. It is meant for you to be able to go to different parts and pieces, like Val had mentioned, how it's what the structure of the framework is like, that you are able to kind of use it and maneuver through it.
I should also add, I believe once it's on the website, you'll be able to just download or access the separate parts of it. So if you just want to look at member engagement, that section, you can look at that. If you just want to look at race-based data collection, you could just look at that as well.
Which I think is really useful, especially, someone had put go through section by section at meetings. So it's not quite so overwhelming when you see it as one document. You can take each section and kind of work through and have guided discussions, like another person had mentioned, as a guide for future LLE engagement work, which is great. And then help discussions. That's our hope, is that it's a discussion starter. It's a conversation starter. It's an impetus to be able to have some of those meaningful but sometimes challenging conversations that many of us want to but aren't really sure. And even myself, and I've been doing this a while, there are times where I myself am not sure where to start with the conversations, because they can become the fear of kind of digging a hole for yourself when it comes to anti-racism work is always there. So
And
there's
the use,
also using the framework not only in my professional career, but personal day-to-day interactions. I love that someone put this, because this is something that was really important to us, that although the framework is meant and we've created it for the HSJCCs, it is also hopeful for us that people can see how we can become anti-racist using this framework as individuals, in our own lives, in our personal lives, and also spread that to our communities and spread that to our colleagues as well. A guide to help assess community projects, used with case conferencing and program development to identify potential gaps. Certainly very practical uses of such a framework are important as well. Using it as inspiration for building out some of our own work, most definitely. We'll use it as part of process building new programs, design, implementation, and evaluating current programs. I love that you put in there evaluating. I think that's one of the areas sometimes where we gloss over as people in this work. We need to evaluate ourselves. We need to evaluate ourselves not just internally, but building in evaluation of those who are using our services, of those who are coming to us, of those who we are working with, and ensuring that their voices are part of that evaluative process, and that we're providing safe spaces for them to be able to authentically tell us what they think is fantastic. And then engage all agency services, not just the court services. Yes. And I recognize, and I think as a working group, we recognize that some systems are more challenging than others, and have more barriers in place than other systems when it comes to anti-racism work. But those structural determinants are also an opportunity for us to be able to use a framework like this to begin that process of decolonizing, which requires that we take a good hard look at the structures that are in place and start to dismantle those structures piece by piece in order to rebuild what we know is needed instead of what is currently there in our colonized systems. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. And we now have one more question along the same lines. What areas do you think you may need further support in order to advance anti-racist, anti-oppressive work? This is for future us to look at. We've built this framework. We've gone through quite a bit of a process in creating this framework with community. But what other areas do you need support in order to advance in your organizations at your HSJCC tables, anti-racist, anti-oppressive work? So this could be things like more training and development, what areas of training and development you may need. We're really interested because this can help us, your answers can help us to shape what directions we go next in, or what we concurrently can offer when we get this framework out there, what else we can offer or start to build alongside the framework so that we're able to continue to support you at your tables with moving this work forward. Hopefully it changed. Did everybody get the change? Like it changed your screen?
Yeah, it's a change.
Awesome.
And hopefully while everyone's thinking, I see a few things popping up that there's that inspiration that we hope this will provide. It is a living document. So with that aspect of things, I think it does allow for, as you're thinking about how it might advance in future state us, how that would look. Is that having more the voices at the table that are in maybe a leadership position? Are you are some of the areas having that compensation or the way that people are looked at in a sustainable fashion? So you have someone that's going for multiple years on work or committees, subcommittees, and other projects that are important to you. So this is really a question that we do think is going to help in the both interactive, online, and selections that you'll be able to see in the future.
I like the first one, funding for training. As a trainer myself, we can always use more funding to be able to not just buy training and facilitate training, but to create training. And for me, community-based training that's co-created with community members is the way in which we learn the best. So when you say funding for training, where I go to is that, that advocacy piece or, that piece around advocating for more training funding for people to build training with community members is where I go to with this, especially when it comes to anti-racist, anti-oppressive work. And like, Dwayne, Val, and I had mentioned, one of the things that we would leave more space for in building a framework like this would be the stories. So I would love to see more training that we create together with community members that is centered around their stories, centered around the experiences and the stories of people in our communities who are living this every day, who are the ones that don't have access to resources because they're Black, because they're Indigenous, who don't have funding because they're racialized. So, I think that's something that we can consider, looking at ways in which we can begin to advocate and put together, ways in which we can collect data about what the need for this type of funding for training is. And then I see here, how can rural-based communities engage in anti-racist and anti-oppressive work? And that is one of the areas in which I think we could also do better within the framework, that outreach to rural communities, and really paying attention and really focusing in on rural communities. We did have some representation, but because this was voluntary based and the idea of, we put a call out for community participation. So we were somewhat limited in that regard, based on who volunteered to be a part of those focus groups and to be community connectors. So I think moving forward if we were to look at where we could focus our intentions, as far as getting feedback and as far as running further focus groups or looking at particular communities that we want to support, the rural communities is where I would start, because I know that that's piece that is somewhat limited in our building of the framework and engaging with community while we were doing that. So I appreciate that you said that. Thank you. I think somebody is, there you go. Thank you so much.
Hi, Shereen. We do have a question in the Q&A.
I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Somebody's asking, can you please elaborate why race-based data is needed for statistic purpose? For example, in court-mandated program, the data may show there's a significant majority of clients who identify with a particular race, and I'm worried this data may be used in the wrong ways. We know there is an overrepresentation of Black, Indigenous, and racialized individuals within the criminal justice system, which from my social work background, I can understand is symptomatic of colonial structures and disproportionately affect the exert power and control over marginalized individuals. However, I'm worried that others may take this data and use it to imply that people of certain races are problematic or violent. Do the benefits of collecting this data outweigh the risks? How can we ensure this data is kept secure and used in appropriate ways?
I can take that. I just spoke about this at a conference in Montreal. And this is my area of passion, but also of advocacy. When we say race-based data collection, what you have talked about is what comes to most people's mind. This idea that race-based data collection has been used historically and continuing today to justify inequities within our systems. That's not what we're talking about when we say race-based data collection. And I don't use the term race-based data collection anymore because race, as we all know, is a social construct. It isn't how people refer to themselves. I don't refer to myself as my race. However, it is the systemic, the term that is used within systems. So when we're talking about data collection, we're talking about the equitable use of data collection. What we're talking about is data justice. How do we ensure that people, when they provide their information about who they are, what their identities are, they're also we also open up space for them to tell us how that has impacted them, not just collecting numbers, not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data so that we can, and we do this too, so that we can apply for funding, so that we can, apply for funding for particular programs. That's part of the system that we operate in, that we have to do. But when we, as individuals and as organizations, ask about people's identity and collect that information, it should always be to be responsive to their needs, those individual needs, those cultural needs, those needs that are based on inequities that we know data has been used in the past to weaponize against people from particular groups. So there's a responsibility that comes with data collection that requires that people understand how data has been used and how scientific racism has been used to justify building inequities into our systems. And that's what we're talking about. That assurance that you're not collecting data to be able to use it against people. And there is that still exists, especially, and I will use the two systems that, I'm most familiar with, that I've done the research with. The justice system and the healthcare system continue to use data, race-based data, as a weapon against communities, against whole communities, to justify not funding them, to justify some of the decisions that are made within governments, that are made within our legal system, that are made within our healthcare systems. So we want to ensure that when we go about anti-racist, anti-oppressive work, that we understand as organizations and as individuals that this is how data is used. This is the way people perceive us. When we're asking people for their information, we need to be real about what we're doing with it. I can't ask you about who you are if I'm not telling you what I'm going to do with your information. And to be authentic, if I'm going to use it to apply for funding, I need to tell people that. Yeah, I need to ask, I'm asking you these questions because we're doing an application for funding for a housing project that we want to work on. And your information will help me to make the case that we need to be able to get funding for more housing for Indigenous people. That's what we need to do when we collect data, is clarify what the data is used for. And if you're not using it to better the quality or to reduce inequities, then don't collect it. Don't collect it, or give people the option to not provide you their data. Because if you're not using it, they should be able to, they are the owners of their information. So they should be able to tell you no. So that's one of the things that, we could expand upon. And I think that's another area where, once the framework is out there, if resources and supports are needed or wanted around that piece of it, we could certainly work on that as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Shereen. Thank you guys for joining today. This was such an amazing presentation. So if I could get everyone to please join me in thanking our speakers for their great presentation and sharing their knowledge with us. I do ask that you take a moment to fill out the survey for this session. You can click on the agenda platform, choose the session you're currently attending next to the join button, and you'll find a survey button. Click on the button and you will be guided to a quick survey. We encourage you to take some time to connect with fellow participants and view our exhibit hall and the poster presentations. We also would appreciate if you took a moment to complete the conference evaluation, which you can find by clicking the evaluation icon on the conference homepage in the menu bar. So your feedback is incredibly valuable. So thank you once again for joining us and taking the time with your questions. We'll now be taking an hour break for lunch from 12 to 1. We have a lunchtime session starting at 12:15 to 12:45 called Peer Support and Action, the Young Adult Cannabis Harm Reduction Digital Storytelling Project. Following lunch at 1 p.m., please join us for our keynote speaker. And to join the keynote, click on the agenda link in the menu, then click the join button for the presentation. Our D-Series concurrent sessions will follow after the afternoon break at 2:30 p.m. Click on agenda in the platform and choose the session in the D-Series that you would like to join. So once again, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.